We want to talk about implementation reports. Why are we talking about implementation reports? Who cares about implementation reports? Omole.
It gives us a fair overview what the county has done over a given period of time. So you know what the county government has been able to do and when and probably who participated and how much resources were involved.
Okay, so how your resources are being used, what they're being used for, when they're being used.
They are useful as a tool for monitoring and evaluation of how counties are doing in terms of budget implementation.
So useful to who?
To either members of the civil society and also to the public as well.
Okay, good. So this is a key accountability tool. It's a key part of the monitoring process. It's a key part of helping to hold executive officers to account. Walk me through how it sits in this. What is the implementation stage? Who's involved in the implementation stage? When do the reports come?
The reports come in quarterly, or they are so-called in-year reports. The first one comes out 3 months after enactment of the budget. That is 30 days after the end of the first quarter. So that would be maybe end of October.
Okay.
That's when we expect the first implementation report.
So budget implementation starts on July 1st. We run through the first quarter, July, August, September. Then 30 days after that, or a month after that, we have the first implementation report, right?
Then we get the second implementation report. That is the half-year report that in end of January. Then another quarter begins January, February, March. Then another report in April. And it continues to the end of the financial year.
So your last implementation report, your fourth quarter implementation report, is actually coming out in the next year already. Yeah? And that is part of the implementation process, or part of the implementation reporting process, is the release of your fourth quarter implementation report. But the next document into which that feeds, that you use to review budget implementation from the previous year, is what? CBROP. Spell it out for us. Good. The County Budget Review and Outlook paper, which is coming out down here around October or November, and that is giving us a review of the whole previous year as well, okay? With a little bit of narrative, and now that Outlook section, which is saying, having reviewed what happened last year, here's what we're thinking for the next year. Now, the contents of these reports. Okay, these are measures of performance. How do we measure performance?
There's that element of how then the county has performed with regard to generation of revenues.
Revenues?
Now, the actual expenditure, which again are linked to either programs or activities.
So we are looking at the performance of revenue and we are looking at the performance of spending.
Yes.
Okay. How do we think about performance?
In looking at the expenditure, in comparison with the last budget, we're looking at how more we have raised this time compared to the last time.
This time compared to the last time? Yeah. Okay, so suppose we are looking at the second quarter reports. What are we looking for?
We'll be looking at the absorption rates against the total amount that is budgeted for your year. Then we could look at to see whether they're in line to achieve the intended target that they had to spend in that financial year. So that we're able to look at the performance, whether they are spending in line or they are overspending.
Okay, so that is one way of calculating absorption, is to look at how much did you spend versus your budget for the year, right? That is one way of talking about absorption. You can also, what else can you compare what you have spent to?
You compare it to how much you spend similar time previous fiscal year. Yeah.
Okay, how much did I spend compared to how much did I spend in the second quarter of the previous year? If that is the case, how do we think about spending during each quarter?
When counties formulate their targets, at times the targets are not realistic. And we'll find that counties are not able to collect enough. And that would imply that even in terms of programming, some of the programs will be affected.
Good. So you are just jumping one step ahead of where I wanted to go. So we should be setting targets. We talked about this last time when we looked at some of the documents, that there are targets. There are targets on a quarterly basis for how much we are going to collect and how much we are going to spend. And those targets are an attempt by the government to anticipate the actual pattern of spending. So we move away from the 25%, et cetera, 25, 50, 75, and we move to a target which is based on what we actually anticipate doing.
I think it's more in order. I think it makes much more sense when you place a target and measure your performance based on the target. How much percentage did I achieve based on the target? But when you compare to what you did last year and this year, probably your systems, it's not based on. It's just based on time. I mean, it gives you a relative outlook of what happened the other time and this time, but probably your systems were not as strong as they are this year. Probably there are more people who have come into the market that help you to generate a lot more revenue. So it doesn't give you a clear picture of how you're performing as an organization or as government.
I think if we take an example of a company and we are looking at whether it's profitable or not, it's improving. An example of Kenya Highways. Last time they made they made maybe 100 billion loss. This year they have made 60. They are performing well because they are improving. So if I look at the first example, the previous year's second quarter, we generated 50, and now we have 100, although the target is 120. We have improved by 100%. Whether it is we did not meet our targets, the fact remains that we have done better than last year.
So don't pay attention to the target, is the lesson. Ignore the target. Ignore the target. Just look here. This is all you need to know.
Why I'm saying the target in that case is not important, because the person who set the target was ambitious.
Aha. So where the target is high, if you use the comparison between actual and target, it will look like you underperformed, when in fact your target was not realistic. So number one, you should look at the trends. And the trends will tell you something about what is realistic, okay? But the trends can also be misleading when you don't have a lot of information, right? We don't have a lot of years of data for counties. So you use the data you have, but you also have to use your common sense. And that is what I am trying to get at in this conversation. What does our intuition tell us? What does our common sense tell us about what is reasonable in a given period of time? Okay? So I want to suggest to you, when you're looking at things like this and you have no other information or you have limited information, look for something like an increase of 5 to 15%. Okay? Absent any information. You might have information showing that your county revenues are growing by 20 or 30% every year. You should use that information if you have that information. But if you don't have any information, you should use a guess like this, okay?